a little while ago, I had a comment on my channel that I found really interesting, and I can't remember the words verbatim, but it was along the lines of, I'm really interested in making content about my journey of being an autistic person, but I'm a little concerned about friends and family seeing the material and how they might feel about it. So is this something that you, meaning I, worry about? So I thought I'd have a bit of a chat about it within a wider context about oversharing, because it's something that comes up a lot in the autistic community, isn't it? You know, a lot of autistic creators share a lot of personal stories, and I thought it was an interesting topic for today's video. So I guess to start, I should discuss the reasons why I made this channel, because it's still a very new channel. I was diagnosed as autistic in February this year, and I started creating contents in March. Well, I made a few videos actually, and I kind of left the channel until about kind of May, because I noticed that one of my, well, I think actually my very first video started to get quite a few views, so it encouraged me to obviously make more content. But I I have an art channel that I started around 10 years ago now. Gosh, it's quite a long time really, but I've been very used to sharing contents about my art, and that's been on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. And I guess in the early days I was a bit kind of nervous about sharing my art, because when we start off as artists, we're invariably, or quite often, not very good, because we've not found our creative voices yet. We've not found our kind of visual language. So yeah, you're really vulnerable in the early days, because you're kind of forever worrying about what people think about your creative work. And I certainly had a fair few worries in the early days about that, but as time went on, I just developed a bit of a confidence around it really. And like everything, you'll get kind of positive comments and negative comments as well, which none of us like, but I found it actually quite useful in helping me develop a bit of a thicker skin around my artwork really. So yeah, as time's gone on, I've been kind of very used to sharing stuff about my art really. And I'd make contents on my YouTube channel really about art process videos and tutorials and stuff like that. But I wouldn't share kind of too much about me as a person or my personal life, because it just really wasn't relevant to the channel. So when I got my diagnosis this year, I really felt like it was something that I wanted to kind of document in some way, and creating a YouTube channel specifically to talk about my journey as a newly discovered autistic person just felt kind of the right thing to do in many ways. So yeah, I set up my channel not really expecting very much to happen with it really. I just felt like it would almost be a bit kind of cathartic to get some of this stuff off my chest really. If anything, to try and convince myself that I was autistic, or that I am autistic, because I've been really struggling with imposter syndrome, which is a very common thing to happen or to deal with as a newly diagnosed or newly self-realised autistic person. But of course, in creating this content about my diagnosis, I do think about who's going to see it, but not in any kind of huge way, really. I think because I've been sharing my arts for years, and because people I know have seen that content, and it's made me kind of realise that most people aren't actually that bothered about what you get up to in your creative life. Occasionally you might get a kind of comment from somebody that they like what you're doing, but it's really kind of rare, if I'm honest. most people that I know in some kind of capacity in a personal way have just basically ignored what I do. So in many ways, it gave me a good kind of grounding for talking about autism, because I guess I'm at a point where if people I know did see this kind of material, firstly, I don't think they'd be very interested in it, and excuse me, and secondly, if they did watch it, I don't know. I, I don't think I'm that bothered really. For me, I'm far more invested in my own journey and my own discovery and learning about autism. That kind of tips the balance of the scales for me. I'm more invested in autism as almost as a special interest than I am in what people might think of that. That doesn't mean to say, however, that this stuff is easily accessible, because I've used a pseudonym for my artwork for the last 10 years. I've been known as Clay Disarray, so it just made sense really to create another pseudonym for my autism channel, hence Creative Autistic. And it's not because I'm worried about people I know seeing this stuff. It's just really about creating an extra level of privacy. I'm not too fussed really if people I know see it, but I don't want it to be easily accessible, if that makes sense. So, it's just creating levels of privacy, levels of safety, and it's one of the reasons why I always look the same on YouTube. I always wear the same thing, I have my hair the same, because I feel that if somebody were to see me outside on the streets, looking different, they'd have less of a chance of perhaps recognising me. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But for me, it just makes me feel safer. And I think that's really important. And I think all of this ties in with a bigger theme, actually, of autistic creators who share elements of their personal life and stories from their past and personal anecdotes to really give a sense of what their autistic experience is like, really. And I think there is an importance in doing that, because I think if we talk too broadly in general terms, we kind of lose meaning, really, don't we? So I think it's important to add kind of personal context sometimes, so that other autistic people can see themselves in the example stories that you're putting out there, really. I think sometimes formal language can become kind of so clinical that we can't really see ourselves as people within it. So, these personal stories are really important, because we can think, right, I really identify with this person's story. I really identify with the way they see the world, through this particular trait, etc. And all of this context is just so valuable in helping us work out our own experience of being autistic. But of course, there is a point where you think, am I sharing too much? And that's a very valid question to ask, because we have to keep ourselves safe. And I think for me, the way that I do this, or the way that I ensure that I feel safe in sharing stories and personal anecdotes and all of this, is that it has to go through one test for me. And the test is this thing that I'm about to share with the world something that I would be happy to share with Ian's friends? And Ian's friends, the one that I'm thinking of, is somebody that I know pretty well, but I don't know them overly well. So if I can imagine myself talking to this person about whatever it is I want to talk about here, then I'm pretty happy for that to go out in my videos, basically. The only exception to this, however, is anything to do with perimenopause or menopause, because I'm pretty certain that Ian's friend would not be interested at all, but that's the only exception. But I'm finding that as I'm getting older and going through perimenopause, etc., the difference that we have in hormones and, all of that jazz almost makes you care far less about what people think about you. Certainly, that's been my experience anyway. I used to be so caught up in what people thought of me, really, certainly in my younger years as a younger adult. In any kind of social scenario, I'd always worry about what people thought of me, and was I masking okay? Did I give the impression of being normal enough? And I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but I'm finding as I've got older, I care far less about any of this, really. And for me, I've had a terrible time in perimenopause, and it continues. And I've done a few videos on perimenopause, and I'll leave those linked below. But the one advantage of going through this process is that I do care far less about what people think. That's not to say, however, that I'll share any old thing about my personal life, because I do have boundaries in place, and what feels comfortable now might feel different in perhaps a year or two. Perhaps there will be other stories that I'll feel more comfortable sharing, but for now, they're kind of locked away, and that's where they're staying for the time being, certainly. But I think if you are in a position where you want to share with the world your autistic experience and create content online, whether that be YouTube or Instagram or any other platform, I think you should set in place your own personal rules for what you're prepared to share and what you're not prepared to share, more importantly. I think it's a case of really trying to remember that whatever you put out on the internet exists forever. So it's really important to have this in mind whenever you're preparing to put anything out there into the ether, because once it's out there, it is out there forever. And we know that a lot of autistic people are partial to oversharing, and certainly I've been really guilty of doing this in my life. And I'm just grateful that I didn't live my formative years in a time where everything was put online. I really feel for young people today, particularly young autistic people, because everything is documented, isn't it? And that's a really scary thing, I think. And if you're used to kind of oversharing in order to kind of feel connections with other people, that's it's a really kind of tricky area, really. I do have one interesting observation, or I think it's interesting anyway, in terms of oversharing. And I found that I have been way more likely to overshare in times of severe, and I do mean severe, dysregulation. And I'm thinking of a few times in my life where I suspect my support needs were at a higher level, and I've just lost my ability to filter actually what I'm saying to people. And I just have no ability to understand kind of social context, really. So my language has probably been, or has been, inappropriate to the moment, really, or supposedly inappropriate. And I just find that fascinating, because for me, it would make more sense for somebody to overshare if they were a high masking autistic, because they're trying to make connections to other people and to perhaps share information that maybe the other person could resonate with. And for me, it's been the opposite, actually. As a high masking autistic, I've been, or am, very kind of filtered in what I say and how I behave. And it's at times of severe dysregulation that I just lose that ability, really. And I'll happily share whatever's on my mind to other people. I just find that really interesting. And I just touched upon the topic of autistic support needs there, and I just thought I'd mention two videos that I've watched recently, and they're just so brilliant, and I've learned loads from them in terms of support needs and what each level means actually, in terms of personal stories and personal perspectives. And I found it just so much more useful than looking at kind of, infographics or articles on what support needs levels mean. But the first is by Holly Audley, and Holly's a level 2 support needs autistic person, and this video is just brilliant, and I'd heartily recommend that you go and check it out. And I think Holly is a late diagnosed autistic person as well, so it's really interesting to hear her journey. And the second video is by Twyla over at Twyla's Couch, and Twyla is another late diagnosed autistic person. And in this video, she's brilliantly broken down what each supports level actually kind of looks like, really, and what it means for different autistic people. And Twyla herself is a level 2 to level 3 support needs autistic person. So for me, it's just brilliant to hear personal stories from autistic people with higher support needs. And for me, both Holly and Twyla's videos have really helped me in terms of trying to work out my own version of autism and what it looks like and what it means to me, but also how my support needs have essentially waxed and waned throughout the years. Nothing is static in terms of autism. It's been really educational for me, and I really want to thank both Holly and Twyla, because their videos have been really helpful for me actually. And yeah, there's been certainly a lot of processing going on in my brain since I've watched them. So I guess this is all a long-winded way of saying to whoever the person was that asked the question about, I'm thinking about creating content around being autistic, but I'm worried about friends and family members seeing it. I think really it's about firstly asking yourself why you want to share it and who you want to share it with. Perhaps you might want to think about having a pseudonym, so you set up an entirely different account on whichever platform it is, and it has no kind of connection to your name or anything like that. So you do create a little bit of a buffer. I would ask yourself how you would feel if people you knew would find out about this content, because that's a hugely important question to ask yourself. And I do wonder actually if, because I don't have children and I've got very few family members, and similarly for Ian, whether that has any bearing really, because there's very few people who would potentially be kind of bothered by it really. So yeah, that's probably a factor for me. And similarly with friends, I don't really see anybody these days through my MCAS, and yeah, I'm always at home, so I'm not actually bothered by what people might think. So I would ask yourself questions along these lines really. What would you do, or how would you feel if you knew people would be seeing this kind of content? And I'd also ensure that you've got some rules put in place, really, because you have to feel 100% confident and 100% comfortable with what you're putting out online, because yes, you can delete it, but of course it's, the internet, so it is really out there forever. So I'd like to thank the person that posed this question to me originally, and I'm really sorry that I didn't take a screen grab or anything like that. So I honestly can't remember who it was that put this question forward, but I found it really interesting, so thank you for that. And also a really big thank you to everybody who left really lovely, kind comments on last week's video and a community post that I posted earlier in the week about my dog. He's doing okay. He's demanding food all of the time now, which is a really good sign. And yeah, he's doing better in terms of just trying to navigate the house, etc. So we're really pleased with his progress. So thank you ever so much. It was the only time that I was kind of nervous to put out a video, if I'm honest, and I did really worry that I was oversharing, but I think with a bit of distance, I don't think it was oversharing. You know, I'm just telling you about my dog at the end of the day and how that feels as an autistic person when your dog's not well. It can be really upsetting, and certainly it has been for me, but it was really lovely to have so much support and to hear all of your stories as well about your own amazing little pets who support you as well or have supported you in the past. It was yeah, really, really comforting, so thank you so much. So I think that's going to be it for this week's video. I hope it wasn't too bitty. It was a bit of a kind of free flow again because I don't have great concentration levels at the moment, so I hope that's okay. But anyway, thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.